normal. So today we will deal with physiology. It is because, as you know, come for our entrance exam, and one will be from this. Aim of the whole body is to maintain the pH, maintain the normal pH, which is nothing but 7.35 to 7.45. And this pH is nothing but the negative log of H plus ion concentration. For this, why is this precise H plus regulation required? To maintain the normal enzymatic activity. Okay, see, enzyme activity is at its maximum optimum when it is between 7.35 to 7.45. That is why this normal regulation is required. So we are dealing with acids and bases. So what are the molecules that can release H plus into the solution are acids, and bases are the one that can accept H plus, Okay. Now, how do we know this normal pH is 7.45 is arterial blood H plus concentration is 4. So negative logarithm of H plus, negative logarithm of this H plus. So negative logarithm of 4 will be 7.4. This is how we get the normal pH. Okay. So how is this maintained? How is this normal pH maintained? By the acid-base balance system in our body. So it can be maintained only when the production equals elimination. Correct, no? So how does this occur? This occurs at 3 places. Firstly, there is production, then there is transportation, and then the elimination. How is it produced? It can either be produced as physiological process or pathological process. Pathological process is nothing but metabolic acidosis and alkalosis. Physiologically, by body's metabolism, like breakdown of fats or carbohydrates, will lead to CO2. Breakdown of proteins will lead to H2SO4. Breakdown of phospholipids will lead to H3PO4. CO2 is volatile. It is called volatile because it can be eliminated by the lungs. But whereas H2SO4 and H3PO4 need to be eliminated by the kidneys, so they are non-volatile. Okay, they can easily escape out. CO2 can escape out through gaseous form. That's why it is called as volatile. Then it is transported in the blood. What is its role in the blood? Once these acids get added to the blood, there shouldn't be change in the pH. Correct? That is where the buffer system comes into play. Then these buffers deliver it to lungs and kidneys for them to get eliminated. So the defense system will be, what will be the defense system? First is the chemical buffers, as we saw over here. These are first line, which acts immediately, followed by, we saw that chemical buffers deliver the acids and bases to the lungs. So we have second line is respiratory, which acts within few minutes. Then lastly, and the best among all, is kidneys. These are the third line, which acts over a period of few hours to days. Now, firstly, we'll see what are buffers, role of buffers. Okay, these were the first line. These were the first line agent, which acts immediately. Once acid is produced into the blood, they are in the blood. Buffer acts, there's a store of buffer in the blood, so they act immediately. Now we can see buffer is any substance that can reversibly bind to H plus, So buffer plus H plus forms H buffer. This is what we see. And one more concept to note is they do not eliminate H plus. All they do is they bind. As we can see over here, all they do is they bind to the buffer. And once the site is reached, like lungs or kidney is reached, they get eliminated. So the role of buffer is only to bind. They do not eliminate. Okay. Now coming to classification. Intracellular buffer, extracellular buffer. Intracellular buffers will be proteins and proteins like hemoglobins, or organic phosphates like 2,3-DPG and ATP. They, like how hemoglobin acts is HB plus H plus will form HB H plus. This is delivered to lungs or kidneys, and over there again reverse takes place. And this H plus gets eliminated. This was an example of intracellular buffer. How does extracellular buffer act? Two ways. Two main buffer systems are there in the body: bicarbonate buffer and phosphate buffer. Okay, but intracellular are the most abundant buffers in the body. Most abundant buffers in the body are intracellular buffers. Now we have bicarbonate buffers. So how does this act? First, let's take that body is in acidemia. If there is acidemia, there is increase in H plus. So this H plus, binds with HCO3 minus. Bicarbonate buffer. Bicarbonate buffer is nothing but HCO3 minus that is present in the blood as a store for buffering activity. This H plus and HCO3 minus forms H2CO3. In the presence of carbonic anhydrase, in the lungs, they will be broken down to H2O and CO2. This CO2 is eliminated by the lungs. So H plus is eliminated by the buffer. In the blood, H2CO3 will be formed. So pH is maintained. Now let's come to second, alkalemia. There is alkalemia in the body, increase in base. So let's take an example of NaOH. Let's take example of NaOH. NaOH binds to H2CO3. So to form NaHCO3 and H2O. But this NaHCO3 is a weaker base. It is very much weaker base compared to NaOH. NaOH is a very strong base. So strong base. So increase in pH will be very high. But a very much weaker base like NaHCO3 is formed. So increase in the pH will be very less. If NaOH can increase from 7.4 to 7.8, this weaker base will just increase it by 7.45. This is the advantage of NaHCO3. This is how H2CO3 acts as a buffer in alkalemia. How do we get this H2CO3 is, in the body, we have H2O in the blood as well as CO2. H2O combines with CO2 to form this H2CO3. When this is formed, CO2 concentration in the blood decreases. When there is decrease in CO2 concentration in the blood, there is decrease in the rate of respiration. This will lead to CO2 retention. If there is CO2 retention, there is increase in the H plus. Increase in H plus will decrease pH. This will again bring back pH to normal in case of alkalemia. This is the second process how bicarbonate buffer acts. And this NaHCO3 breaks down into Na plus, HCO3 minus and H plus. HCO3 minus gets excreted in the kidney. So again, this decreases the pH, and HCO3 minus breaks down, NaHCO3 minus breaks down to H plus as well. This H plus will add in to the concentration of H plus ions, which again decreases the pH. So as a whole, pH is brought back to normal of 7.4. Okay, so this is how bicarbonate buffers act. Now coming to the next concept of pK. Okay, dissociation constant. We'll read. Now I'll give a statement. We'll give a statement that bicarbonate buffer is the most effective extracellular buffer. Okay, most effective extracellular buffer. Now let's solve this question. Assertion states that phosphate buffer is a better buffer system than bicarbonate buffer. Reason is the pKa dissociation constant, which we are going to read now, of phosphate buffer is higher than pK of the bicarbonate buffer. Can you guys answer? Can you guys answer now? A, B, C, D, E. Options are there. Yes, very good, Satya. No, it's not C. C was last time's answer. This time I changed the question. I slightly changed the question. So, Ruchita, you did not read the question, I think so. Yes, good, Roshan and Satya. Option is A. Option is A. Why? We'll see now. We'll see. There is something called as dissociation constant, which we get from the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation, which we are going to read tomorrow. pH equals pK plus log HCO3 minus divided by log dissociated by undissociated form. Here we have some constant called as pK. Okay, this pK is characteristic for every buffer. Every buffer system has its own pK. Okay, so the buffer system is most effective. It is most effective when the pH is near the pK of the system. Okay, when this pH almost equals pK, that is when the buffer system is most effective. Like we see in this graph, we'll take, for example, body's pH to be 6. Okay, pK of bicarbonate buffer is 6.1. So now this is the change in pH. Change in pH is 1. Change in pH is 6 to 7. So change in pH is 1. The amount of acid or base that is being added is this much. So we see that for a large amount of acid or base that is being added, change in pH is just 1. Correct, no? But now coming to physiological pH. Physiological pH of body is this, nothing but 7.4. Over here we see only for a small amount of addition, only for this much amount of addition, change in pH is almost close to 1. So that is why we say when pK, which is 6.1, almost equals the pH. For example, we took that time body's pH to be 6. It was highly effective. That is why we state that. The buffer system is most effective when pH is near the pK of the system. Hope you guys understood this. The above equation will be explained tomorrow in detail. Okay, Vinay? We are just learning the concept of dissociation constant. Okay, please do attend tomorrow. It will be taught in detail. So the pK of bicarbonate system is 6.1. Still, we call this, still the statement initially made was it is the most powerful extracellular buffer. Okay, why? Because one, HCO3 minus has a very high concentration in the blood as compared to phosphate buffer. It has a higher concentration in the blood. Two, the products like HCO3 minus and CO2 formed by the bicarbonate buffer, NaHCO3 buffer, can be immediately eliminated by the lungs and kidney, and they can be regulated. That is why in the blood, though the pK is very less, like 6.1, and the gap is huge, 6.1 to 7.4, still we can call it to be a powerful buffer, much powerful buffer than phosphate. These are the reasons. Second, coming to phosphate buffer. Phosphate buffer, it is, yeah, this is an important statement. It is both intracellular and extracellular, because in intracellular we saw ATP 2,3 DPG, etc. Right? They have phosphate in them. So they form both intracellular and extracellular buffers. Now let's see how phosphate buffer works. How does phosphate buffer works in case of acidemia and alkalemia? If there is acidosis, there will be, for example, there is increase in HCl. This combines with phosphate buffer to form NaH2PO4. Again, the same concept. This is over there it was a weaker base. Over here, NaH2PO4 is a weaker acid. So change in pH will be minimized. This is how phosphate acts in acidemia. Coming to alkalemia, there is increase in NaOH. Let's say there is increase in NaOH. It combines with NaH2PO4 to form Na2HPO4. Again, same. It is a weaker base. So change in pH is again minimized. Now we see that again dissociation constant. We told that it is characteristic for every bicarbonate system. So for this, it is 6.8. That is why it is a better buffer as compared to bicarbonate. Better buffer as compared to bicarbonate for neutralizing individual molecule of H+. Individual molecule of H+, it is a better buffer. But when it comes to our system, body system as a whole, its concentration is very less in the blood. That is why bicarbonate buffer is much better. Okay, hope you got this concept right. They play a better role in renal tubular system. In renal tubular system, we'll see today as the class progresses, they have a better role because tubular fluid pH is much lower. So it becomes like tubular fluid pH is around 6.9, which is much closer to 6.8. So it acts in a better way and concentration as well is more. Okay. Then coming to, we finished the buffer system. So acid is produced into the blood. In blood, buffer binds to the acid produced in the blood, and then this buffer takes it to lungs and kidney for elimination. So let's see how lungs eliminate the acid. After this buffer, second line of defense is lungs. Okay, so it is a better buffer as compared to the ones in the blood, bicarbonate and phosphate buffer. So increase in H+, there is increase in S+ in the body, there is acidemia. This we saw the role of HCO3 minus forms H2CO3 and brings the H+ molecule into the lung. Okay, over here in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, they are broken down to H2O and CO2. This CO2 is eliminated in the lung. Simple. The process is very simple. There is acidemia, bicarbonate buffer acts, binds to H+, gets it to the lungs, forms CO2, and they are eliminated. So this is how lungs act. a very simple process, okay. So we see if there is decrease in pH, there is increase in CO2. Decrease in pH means there is increase in H plus concentration. If there is increase in H plus concentration, there is increase in CO2. If there is increase in CO2, it will act over the receptors, central as well as the peripheral receptors, like J receptors in the periphery, central medullary receptors. It will act and increase the rate of respiration. If there is increase in the rate of respiration, CO2 gets eliminated. Then coming to decrease in pH, increase in pH. If there is increase in pH, there is decrease in H plus. If there is decrease in H plus, there is decrease in CO2. So there is no stimulation now. There is no stimulation in the central or in the periphery. That will lead to decreased rate of respiration. When there is decrease in the rate of respiration, there will be CO2 retention. There will be CO2 retention. This CO2 retention will increase the H plus ion concentration. That is what we see in this graph as well. That is what we see in this graph. As the pH decreases, there will be increase in the rate of ventilation. As the pH decreases, rate of ventilation sharply increases. That is what we see in this graph. Moving forward, we come to the third line of defense. We come to the third and the best line of defense. Third and the best line of defense being kidney. So under normal circumstances, what is the target for the kidney? We'll read what is the target for the kidney to maintain normal pH of 7.4. Okay. It almost filters 4,320 milliequivalents of bicarbonate, because GFR is 180 liters per day into 24 milliequivalents being the normal concentration. You get 4,320 milliequivalents of bicarbonates. If this amount of bicarbonate gets excreted, there won't be any buffer left in the body. So kidney has to reabsorb, no? Kidney has to reabsorb, but it cannot just reabsorb. If HCO3 minus is reabsorbed, kidneys have to secrete H plus. For this exchange to take place and the concentration gradient to be maintained, correct? So first target of kidney is to produce 4,320 milliequivalents of H plus, okay, to maintain this pH. Second, there is 18 milliequivalents of non-volatile acids produced in the body. This as well needs to be excreted. So another 80 milliequivalents of H plus. Overall, 4,400 milliequivalents of H plus needs to be secreted by renal tubules to maintain the pH as 7.4. Okay. So this was under normal circumstances, but under pathological situations, there might be acidemia and alkalemia, correct? No? So acidosis or alkalosis. Then what does the kidney do? Kidney starts adapting itself. Kidney starts adapting itself. How? If there is acidosis, they do not excrete HCO3 minus. Simple. They store all the HCO3 minus. They reabsorb all the HCO3 minus. And they produce new HCO3 minus into extracellular fluid. So in case of HCO3 minus, in case of acidosis, increase in H plus. Increase in H plus, there is reabsorption of HCO3 minus and production of new HCO3 minus. That will increase in HCO3 minus. That will lead to increase in HCO3 minus. In the body, there is increase in H plus. This will go combine with this and pH is neutralized. pH is neutralized. So what will happen in alkalosis? What will happen in alkalosis? Simple. They just do not reabsorb all the HCO3 minus, because as it is, there is alkalemia. So as it is, there will be increase in HCO3 minus. So they just don't reabsorb all the HCO3 minus. Simple. This will decrease extracellular pH. Okay. Now we will see how does this take place. How does this HCO3 minus reabsorption take place? Okay. This is a question. It is the same repeat of last time. In which of the following segments bicarbonate reabsorption doesn't take place? In which of the following segments bicarbonate reabsorption doesn't take place? Can you guys answer? More than one can be right. More than one can be right. Okay, ascending limb. Any other answer? It's a PGI type of question, Avantika. Descending limbs. Correct. Satya's and Avantika's answer combined. it is ascending and descending limb. See, how does this reabsorption takes place? Once HCO3 minus is filtered, 4320 milliequivalents of HCO3 minus is put into the body. There should be reabsorption. One in PCT, almost 85% will be reabsorbed. This much amount of H plus will be secreted. Okay. Again, in the DCT, 10%. In the collecting tubule, almost 5%. Okay. This is what happens. This is how HCO3 minus is reabsorbed back into the body. If HCO3 minus is reabsorbed back into the body, there will be buffer store. Buffer store. This acts as buffer store in the body to resist any change in the pH. So, how does this take place? One, in the proximal segment. This takes place by secondary active transport. Why? Because ATP is not directly being used over here. ATP is not directly being used over here. It is used over here. Na plus K plus ATP acts, okay, drives the Na plus, drives the Na plus. This movement of Na plus from the tubular lumen into the fluid, interstitial fluid, lets H plus be secreted into the tubular lumen. The concentration gradient will be maintained. Concentration gradient, or not the concentration gradient, the charge will be maintained. If one plus comes in, another plus goes out. So here it will be neutral. The same thing takes place over here. One plus goes in, Na plus, one plus comes out, K plus. So neutrality is maintained. This H plus which is gone out will combine with HCO3 minus, will combine with HCO3 minus to form H2CO3. In the presence of carbonic anhydrase 4, it will break down to CO2 and H2O. CO2 comes inside the tubular lumen, combines with the water that is present inside the tubular lumen to form H2CO3. H2CO3 will be broken into HCO3 minus and H plus. This HCO3 minus is reabsorbed back. So HCO3 minus over here that was there in the tubular lumen is secreted back into the interstitium, back into the body, extracellular fluid. That is how it works in the proximal segment, by secondary active transport. In the late distal tubule and collecting ducts, it acts by primary active transport. The whole process is the same, just that this H plus that is secreted into the tubular lumen is by a ATP pump. It is ATP dependent. That's why it is primary active transport in the intercalated cells. So we saw how HCO3 minus reabsorption takes place, and correct no. But when there is excess production in the body, this was normal physiology. This was till now what we saw was normal physiology of HCO3 minus being reabsorbed into the body to maintain the buffer store. Now what happens? Now in case of acidemia, the buffer store will be totally utilized. That time what happens? First, initially there is H plus production in the body, there is acidemia. So all HCO3 minus are deabsorbed in exchange for H plus to maintain the buffer. Over. Now all the HCO3 minus is reabsorbed. There is no more HCO3 minus left, but still there is acidemia in the body. Still more H plus is there. One thing the kidney can do is excrete the full H plus in the ionic form. But if it has to do this, there is a problem, because the urinary lower limit of pH is just 4.5. It cannot go below 4.5. So if H plus is excreted in ionic form, the urine rapidly reaches this concentration. This concentration is rapidly reached. So this cannot take place. Then that time there will be more acidosis in the body. To prevent this, we have something called as tubular buffers again. Tubular buffers. What do? They do not change this pH so drastically. So large amount of H plus can be excreted using this tubular buffers. To maintain normal physiology, this HCO3 minus absorption was enough. But there is acidosis. So we need more. We need more of H plus to be excreted. That time tubular buffers come into picture. They cause H plus excretion and new HCO3 minus is generated. If HCO3 minus is excess, like in alkalemia, this urinary limit of pH is not a problem. So they can just excrete the excess HCO3 minus. Okay, so that is what happens in acidemia and alkalemia. So we read about these tubular buffers now. We'll read about these tubular buffers now. Firstly, there is phosphate buffer. Phosphate buffer. And as we had already mentioned, Ayush, that is the limit. That is the maximum limit of kidney. It cannot go beyond that. It cannot go beyond that. Okay, that is the maximum limit of kidney. Below that, it cannot acidify the urine. That's all it can acidify. That is why the role of tubular buffers. Hope you got it. Effectiveness is much more in the tubular buffers, much more in the renal tubules as compared to extracellular fluid, because one, it gets concentrated in the tubular fluid. Next, PK is much closer to urinary pH. So how do this phosphate buffer work? Initially, there is NaHPO4 minus in the tubular lumen. Again, by the same process of secondary active transport, Na plus is reabsorbed, H plus is put to maintain neutral pH in the lumen. Okay, this H plus combines with NaHPO4 minus to form NaH2PO4. Same thing that took place in extracellular fluid. This is the same thing that took place. The phenomena is the same. Again, this is a weaker acid, so there is less reduction in the pH. So urinary pH of this 4.5 is not reached that easily. So more and more H plus can be excreted this way. In the similar way, if there is CO2 production, which as well adds on to acid, CO2 and H plus both go hand in hand. That we saw initially, combines with H2O to form H2CO3. This will again break down to HCO3 minus, and new HCO3 minus is generated. So on one hand, we have new HCO3 minus generated to act as buffer in the extracellular fluid, and on the other hand, we have some amount of H plus that is excreted as well. So in both ways, there is reduction in the pH. Not reduction in the pH. There is already reduction in the pH. There will be increase in the pH to make it neutral, 7.4. 1 by excretion of H plus, 2 by generation of new HCO3 minus. So this is about phosphate buffer system. Second, we have ammonia buffer system in the kidney. Where all they act? They act in proximal tubules, ascending limb of loop of Henle, and distal tubules. How do they act over here? Ammonia buffer, where do we get this ammonia from? From glutamine. There is high amount of glutamine stored in the body, amino acid glutamine. This glutamine breaks down to form HCO3 minus and NH4 plus. So again, new molecules of HCO3 minus are generated. This will again bring back the pH to normal, and H plus is secreted. How does H plus get secreted? It's actually NH3 that is being produced. NH3 combines with H plus to form NH4 plus. This NH4 plus is excreted. Again, NH4 plus is much weaker acid. It is a weaker acid. NH4 plus is formed, which is excreted in the kidney. This is what happens. In the collecting tubules, the only difference is over here, NH3 is not permeable. In the proximal tubules, NH3 is not permeable, but in the collecting tubules, NH3 is permeable, so NH3 can go out. So the same H plus that is there in the tubular lumen also can go out. Over here they combine. Over here they just combine inside the tubular cell. Over here they are combining in the lumen. The process is the same, just that NH3 is permeable over here, NH3 is not. So this is the difference. This is what happens in proximal tubules and collecting tubules, and this is how ammonia buffer act. So in case of chronic acidosis, which is the dominant buffer system in the kidney? Can you guys answer? Yes, very good. It is ammonia buffer because because there is large amount of, okay, since you guys attended the last class, can you tell why? Can you guys only tell why it is ammonia buffer? Why is it ammonia buffer? Anyone? Okay, it's ammonia buffer in chronic acidosis because one, we saw that initially only HCO3 minus gets exhausted. After reabsorption of all HCO3 minus, yes, very good, large amount of glutamine, HCO3 minus gets exhausted. After this, phosphate buffer comes into picture, but this phosphate buffer as well will get exhausted. Whatever is come through the tubular lumen, it will get exhausted. After this, ammonia buffer. How is ammonia used? After this comes the ammonia buffer, but we see there is large concentration of ammonia in the body. So what happens is, no matter how much amount of NH4 plus is produced by combining with H plus, that much amount of glutamine can be replenished in the body because of its larger concentration. So that was the basic concept. That is why in case of chronic acidosis, glutamine as well can work. Next is extracellular fluid depletion. In case of extracellular fluid volume depletion, which among the following happens? It is again the same question. If there is extracellular fluid volume depletion, what happens? No, Pawan, you're wrong. Okay. B, D, E. Few of you. See, if there is extracellular fluid volume depletion, it leads to alkalosis. Why alkalosis? Because when there is depletion of fluid, it leads to activation of RAS system. Activation of RAS system leads to secretion of renin, angiotensin, and aldosterone. One, angiotensin acts on the proximal convoluted tubule and reabsorbs HCO3 minus. That will lead to alkalosis because of increase in HCO3 minus. Two, aldosterone goes and acts on the distal tubule, not distal tubule, in the collecting tubule. It reabsorbs Na plus along with H2O. That is to maintain the osmolarity. Once Na plus comes, H2O is reabsorbed. Correct, no? That will maintain the fluid. Since there is fluid volume depletion, amount of water is restored. But when Na plus is reabsorbed, H plus gets secreted. H plus gets secreted into the tubular lumen. That is why again H plus is lost in the body. One side there is H plus loss in the body. In other side there is gain of HCO3 minus. That leads to alkalosis picture. Again, so B is one of the option. That is followed by increased Na plus reabsorption, again because of aldosterone, as already mentioned. One more thing, it leads to what? Hyperkalemia or hypokalemia. CEE. Yeah, since most of you guys told, it is hypokalemia. Why hypokalemia? Again, if Na plus is reabsorbed, K plus is again secreted. Just like how H plus is secreted, reabsorption of Na plus leads to secretion of K plus. That is why hypokalemia. Okay. Yeah, Na plus K plus antipode. Good, Ayush. Now coming to the next important. This table is important, very important. It is just summing up whatever we have read till now. Factors that increase H plus secretion and HCO3 minus reabsorption. When does this take place? First one, it says increase in PCO2. If there is increase in PCO2, there is increase in H plus. So there is acidemia in the body. That leads to H plus secretion, HCO3 minus reabsorption. First. Second, when there is increase in H plus in the body, correct. It leads to, if there is more H plus is secreted. Two, there is decrease in HCO3 minus in the body. If there is decrease in HCO3 in the body, there is more reabsorption of HCO3 minus taking place. Then if there is extracellular fluid volume depletion, as we saw, in the previous question. 2, angiotensin. Angiotensin acts on the proximal convoluted tubule and reabsorbs the HCO3 minus. 3, aldosterone. Again, Na plus H plus reabsorption, K plus H plus secretion. 4, last one being hypokalemia. When there is hypokalemia, there is decrease in the potassium levels in the blood. When there is decrease in the potassium levels in the blood, they reabsorb the potassium from the tubular lumen, and H plus is secreted. Again, H plus, K plus antipode. H plus being secreted, K plus being reabsorbed. That is why this table is very important. Right, the opposite happens when there is decrease in the H plus. Right, the opposite happens in the next column. In the next column, right, the opposite happens. Okay, so if we remember this, if we can remember this, the other one as well can be remembered easily. And the summary of the whole class, as the summary of a whole class, we have whatever we read till today. What is the systems? Our systems work is to maintain body pH at 7.4. How is it maintained? By equaling the production and elimination. How is it done? 1, production by pathological and physiological process. Once the acid is produced, it is buffered in the blood. How? Here, that is when chemical buffers come into picture, which is the first line of defense: intracellular and extracellular. Intracellular are nothing but proteins, hemoglobin, phosphates, etc. Then comes extracellular, bicarbonate buffer and phosphate buffer, with bicarbonate being most powerful because of its high concentration. Of acidosis and alkalosis, we saw how it acts. We saw how the buffer system acts initially. There is production of CO2, there is production of NaH2PO4, which lungs and kidney. What happens is, last resort was the kidney. It is the most powerful. To maintain the normal balance, first HCO3 minus gets reabsorbed. Once all the HCO3 minus is reabsorbed, then comes the phosphate and the ammonia buffer. In case of acidosis, phosphate and ammonia buffer act and excrete H plus. Okay, in terms of NH4 plus ammonia and NaH2PO4. In case of alkalosis, HCO3 minus is excess of HCO3 minus is excreted. Yes, I'm aware of it. I'm not able to share the screen, and it was over as well. I was just summing up the whole thing, summary. This is what happens. So yeah, we'll wind up the session. Yeah, thank you again once again. Okay, fine. Bye bye.